Do you want to know the secrets to how Christopher Nolan, the director of the Dark Knight trilogy and Inception, writes and directs films that are both commercially and artistically successful? I recently read an entire book on the guy. I met the author of that book, and now I'm going to reveal those little things that cause him to be one of the greatest auteur directors in Hollywood. His secrets stem all the way back to his childhood. His mother was a flight attendant, and so he grew up partially in London and partially in Chicago. He understood the customs of each of these locations and understood early the malleability of societal operation. This is mirrored in his films. Some believe that his films like The Dark Knight are completely one-sided politically, either left or right. Both sides have articles written that are completely convinced Nolan intended to have a distinct political leaning. He, however, disputes that it is politically one-sided. He makes a concerted effort to demonstrate the restraint of binary conclusions about his films. He went to a quite rigid Catholic school in London called Haileybury, and it muted an incredibly imaginative Nolan. So he decided to engage in actions that would allow him to quietly rebel. Maybe it was not quite going to bed on time or watching movies when he wasn't supposed to, but he knew that if he evidently rebelled, it would have unintended consequences. It works the same way in his films. Lots of elements in them, like time dilation in Interstellar and inversion in Tenet, are hugely experimental, but they are commercially accepted because they follow story archetypes that audiences understand. Let's focus specifically on Tenet, as the plot goes in unexpected directions with the inclusion of inversion. It's basically time travel, and there's a lot of exposition throughout it. Nolan balances the potentially confusing plot lines with very basic terms that audiences understand, like protagonist and antagonist. The main character, played by John David Washington, is actually known by no other name than the protagonist. Despite the complexity of his films, he claims that he wants the audience to be in on the joke. He doesn't want them to feel as though the maze of his stories are all-consuming. For example, in Memento, the jumps in time are characterized by the mental state of his main character that has anterograde amnesia, or short-term memory loss. The intention was never to confuse the audience. Even in his films like Interstellar, he employed theoretical physicist Kip Thorne to assist with the scientific accuracy of that film. In order to make sure audiences will accept his films, his wife and producer Emma Thomas will proofread his scripts to ensure that it's consumable for a general audience. One way in which the audience can feel more connected to Nolan's films is if they feel more connected to his characters. Nolan said about Inception that one of the reasons I couldn't finish the script is that it did not have that emotional element in it. It was missing. The thing about dreams is that they're so personal. They're part of our soul, really. It had to have emotional stakes. In order to accomplish that, Nolan turned to his own experience. In production of The Dark Knight, Nolan had to be away from his family for extended periods of time. His feeling of longing for his children during that time fueled his ability to write emotional stakes into the film. Life can be dreary and predictable, but one of the best things about movies is that they feel magical. They give us a chance to experience another world. Nolan distinctly understands this dreamlike nature of film, so he aims to demonstrate through his films our desire for more, whether that be spiritual or existential. In Interstellar, we see Coop venture into the cosmos in order to find security for mankind. In Inception, we see Dom sink deeper and deeper into the layers of the dream world. Those elements cause us to wonder, could we really reach for more in the same way that the characters in our films do? Nolan doesn't give up on ideas, even if they take a long time to execute. He originally came up with a basic idea for Inception while in school, and it didn't come to fruition until a decade or so later. And it may have been for the better. Originally, Nolan wanted to make a Howard Hughes biopic. He wrote the script, even though he knew Scorsese was set to direct his own Hughes film, but he felt that he could do it faster than Scorsese. That inevitably did not happen for Nolan, as Scorsese directed The Aviator. However, Nolan incorporated the concept of splitting a father's empire from his original Hughes script into Inception. The latter half of Nolan's films are affected because they have two twists. For example, in The Prestige, we first find out that Christian Bale's character is achieving the transported man magic trick because he has a twin. That is the first twist. Then we find out at the very end that Hugh Jackman's character achieves the transported man magic trick by killing a clone version of Jackman's character every time he does the trick. However, his twists would not have the same effect if they were random turns in the plot. He emphasizes that good twists always reward what you've seen before. So, when you go back and watch Prestige, try to find those clues that might have been leading you toward the twist of Christian Bale's character having a twin the whole time. If it's a Nolan ending, it's most likely going to be characterized by ambiguity. It is up to the audience to make their own conclusions. The most famous example is Inception. If the top that Dom spins falls over, then that would mean that the main character Dom is in reality. If it refuses to topple over, then that means that he's living in a dream world. The film cuts before the audience can really decide which one it is, and in turn it has a reverberating effect. Nolan always has an interpretation of his endings, but he refuses to tell people what that is because of the mistake he made with Memento. He actually did tell one small news outlet his interpretation of the ending, and felt that because he did so, it diminished the experience of the audience when watching it. You'll hear from actors like Matthew McConaughey that Nolan is actually a very quiet man on set. He allows some of the louder announcements for the extended cast and crew to be done by his assistant director Nilo Otero. He has a really tight focus on his main cast and keeps a really tight ship. His sets usually start at 7 a.m. and end at 7 p.m. He has a pseudo run-and-gun approach to Hollywood filmmaking. In a world where some directors might want 20 or so takes of a certain shot, Nolan will usually want a few takes. McConaughey said that even if he spots something kind of wrong with one take, he probably won't go back and fix it. He sees it as part of the art. He insists on using film cameras instead of digital ones because it changes the way he approaches film. He believes that the constraints of film cameras enhance his creativity from writing to directing. He loves sticking with actors that he has great relationships with. For example, Cillian Murphy has been in 5 of his last 7 films, and he will be the star in Nolan's upcoming Oppenheimer about the creation of the atomic bomb. Christian Bale has also been in 4 of his films, Tom Hardy in 3, Kenneth Branagh in 2, and Michael Caine in just about everything. He places great importance in editing as well. In Inception, there originally was a longer scene that explained the relationship between Michael Caine's character and DiCaprio's character. In the cutting room, however, the editors and Nolan noticed that the scene went on for too long. But then they realized that the audience does not necessarily need to know their relationship. Nolan always starts with a 1-page summary of his films. He likes to come back to it after he finishes a draft of the script because it ensures he stays true to his original vision. Nolan even went a step further before developing the script to Interstellar. He had Hans Zimmer start with the score, not even telling him all of what the film is about, and they use it as a launching pad to start pre-production. Sound design and music are just as essential to Nolan as the image. He even called his production company Syncope, which is a play off the word syncopation, which means a displacement of standard rhythm by stressing beats generally not stressed. He creates immersion through sound through disorientation. Dunkirk is a masterclass example of how Nolan uses music in his films. Composer Hans Zimmer constructs the score for the story of the British avoiding German invasion. Nolan had Hans make smart use of the shepherd's tone. It's an auditory illusion that gives the tense feeling that the musical notes are continuously rising. You feel the unrest of the characters in the film in large part because of the music. In order to be a consistently elite film director, you need to learn to receive criticism effectively. The Prestige underperformed critically, and Nolan remembers a distinctly awful feeling when he drove to the Fifth Theater for the premiere. He says, "What I learned was it was really important to me that I knew the film was good because although it was unpleasant, it was quite an awful sensation. I knew that I had liked what I had done. I felt very good about that." And you realize when the chips are down and everyone turns around and tells you that it's crap, that is all you have. So if you don't believe in it in the first place, you are taking a risk, a terrible risk, end quote. Nolan took this lesson and created the almost universally well-received The Dark Knight. Some sources of inspiration for Nolan are 2001: A Space Odyssey, Michael Mann's Heat, A Clockwork Orange, Pink Floyd's The Wall, Blade Runner, Star Wars, and Francis Bacon's painting. Have you ever wanted to make a film, but you feel intimidated by the process or feel like you don't have the right equipment? One of the greatest things about Nolan, I think, is his ability to make awe-inducing stories for low budgets. His first feature, Following, only had a budget of $6,000. Whether you use an iPhone or an expensive camera, make sure you check out my short film mastery course. I had the wonderful experience of creating an $8,000 budgeted short film in New Mexico with professional actors in exotic locations, and I'm going to run you through the entire process of how a short film gets made, from writing to directing to cinematography to editing and more. It's available for half off right now, and you can check it out in the description. If you want to see the equipment I use for it, click this video right here. I've got the belief that if you put your mind to it, you can create incredible films no matter who you are.